Hello and welcome. You're here for an exciting hour of excitement and exciting things that we're going to excite each other while we're exciting ourselves. That's right. It's the exciting hour of the Game Hump. It's every Wednesday. Here we are, the Game Huggers. And thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy our topic of discussion for today. It's going to be talking about metal. That's right, metal in video games and any kind of games that we can figure out that have metal in it. Any types of metal, I don't know, steel, perhaps copper, maybe stainless steel, maybe some other kinds. I don't know how many different kinds of metal we can find. But nickel, there's probably some nickel, but not any nickelback. That's not real metal. That's something different. But anyway, we're joined this week by a couple of game huggers. Aaron, you may remember Aaron from a few episodes back. He's on the show again. Say hi, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
That joke never, ever gets old. And new to the show, we actually have Chris. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Chris is new to the show, but he's not new to gaming. Chris, why don't you just give us a brief description about yourself?
So I've been gaming since I was really young. Started out on SNES at home, but was playing before that NES, Atari, some friends' houses before I had my own gaming system. Some DOS games back in the day. So
Nice.
been gaming for a while. Huge Nintendo fan. I think I've owned basically every Nintendo system. But you know, kind of like the variety, I end up owning just about every game console when they come out. So right now, Wii U, 3DS, and PS4 are my main gaming systems. Currently playing Bravely Default on the 3DS. Just got into, having a lot of fun with it, even though I'm not a huge RPG fan. And I'm also playing more Smash Brothers lately, which kind of got back into because a bunch of friends around here play a bunch. So, and currently waiting for XCOM 2. That's my next big title, I think. Really looking forward to that since the NDA was lifted for the press. Been lots of impressions online lately. Also have a huge metal background. Been listening to a lot of metal, from progressive to death metal, folk metal, power metal. I mean, you name it. Really, the only genres I'm not a huge fan of would be doom and black metal, really. Although I do like some black metal if it's like symphonic or melodic. So
Yeah. Yep, there's some pretty good black metal bands that It's interesting when you say like there's mainstream black metal that is kind of gross and just doesn't have any kind of. There's no tempo. There's no real it doesn't go anywhere. It is what it is, and it's what kids I guess listen to. But there's a few really good black metal bands that have more symphonic or melodic sounds to it. Like I think Winter Horde is considered a black metal band that I actually really really enjoy. But yeah, pirate metal, folk metal, Arnold Schwarzenegger metal, all kinds of different good ones.
yeah, there's some crazy stuff out there, and you got to embrace the fun stuff too. You can't be serious all the time. So bands like Ailstorm and the like are a ton of fun to listen to, even though they're not something I'd listen to on a daily basis necessarily. But yeah, the black metal thing is interesting because I can definitely appreciate it. I have some friends who are very much into the black metal scene, but not really for me. The production values tend not to be quite as high, and black metal fans kind of like it that way. But some really good symphonic black metal tends to have the same high quality production values as a lot of others, and ends up being something that I can definitely appreciate a bit more.
Yeah, I attempted as well, like you'd mentioned, not being a huge fan of doom metal. I've attempted to enjoy it. I've tried to get into it. Yeah, it's not me. It's so different and so just out of touch with what I personally think is good and crisp and clean. It's just.
My my problem with doom metal is it tends to just be a wall of sound, and not to say that there's no musical merit behind it, just that it's not something that I've ever really been able to get into.
Yep. So, okay, this week we're discussing metal games. Oh, what's wrong, Aaron? Did you have something to say?
I didn't get to discuss my genres that I like, which are basically the same as you two.
Oh, you mean music?
Yes.
Well, why don't you get into a Kanye West rant?
Yes, Kanye West is awesome, but not metal in any way, shape, or form, unfortunately. At some point, maybe he'll sample metal in his music. No, I'm big prog metal, folk metal, melodic death. Thanks to Chris, actually, I didn't even listen to melodic death like a couple years ago, and then he sent me a few bands, and I was like, "Oh, this shit's awesome! I should have been listening to this forever." Thrash and power metal, so it's mostly what I listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, just name like a couple bands that each of you guys are into currently.
That's a tough one. The bands I listen to change on such a frequent basis.
Sure.
Probably some of my all-time favorites, especially with recent releases, Soilwork. Solution 45 put out a pretty good album, although I don't think it's quite as good as some of their previous efforts. I mean, pretty much any folk metal band. I've yet to hear a folk metal band that I don't like, just because of the complexity of the instruments and just kind of what they do. I don't know. Lately, my tastes have been a little proggy, but a lot more melodic death as of late. So I've been listening to. Actually, let's see what my most recent was here. I was listening to Before the Dawn. I don't know if you've heard them.
I've heard of them. I don't know if
Yeah.
I've heard their most recent stuff.
Oh, their last album was, I think, 2012. So they're not huge, but they're kind of similar to like Omnium Gatherum. Very very good band. They also have some female vocals in some of their songs too, kind of like Arcona.
Nice.
But they're very good. Kind of gotten on a kick of theirs lately. I've been listening to some instrumental prog metal, Animals as Leaders, a couple others I can't remember off the top of my head. Speaking of Omnium Gatherum, though, they've got a new album coming out next month, which I'm very excited for.
Nice. Aaron, how about you?
Well, I mean, recently I've been listening to a lot of Bowie and Motorhead for obvious reasons.
To feel sad. To feel sad.
But yeah, lately I've been listening to. I always listen to Iron Maiden. They're like my favorite band. But Dream Theater, because their newest album is coming up at the end of the month.
Oh, it's gonna be so
I'm
good.
just excited for that. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Devin Townsend and At the Gates are ones, because Devin Townsend has so much stuff that I haven't listened to yet because I just started getting into him, and there's so much there.
He is by far my favorite musician. I won't necessarily go on and say that I will that he's my favorite band or any of his acts are my favorite band. But as a musician, it's hard not to respect him for how much music he puts out, how much he gives his all and everything, and just how no matter what he tries. I mean, he's in the middle of writing a symphony right now. He's done like blues and bluegrass style stuff. The extreme metal because he was the vocalist for Strapping Young Lad, and then just everything in between and kind of more of a prog metal bend to him. So anything he puts out, I'm definitely into.
What are some of the characters that Devin Townsend has created? Is one of them Captain Fabulous or something like that?
Captain Spectacular.
Captain Spectacular, that's it. Yeah.
Which in the new Ziltoid album is voiced by Chris Jericho.
Yes, it is. Which is amazing.
Pretty fantastic, and he that's part of his Ziltoid universe. Ziltoid is a omniscient alien from another planet who comes to Earth in search of the ultimate cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so funny.
If you have not listened to the album Ziltoid the Omniscient, you are missing out. It is the best rock opera of all time.
It's really good. Have you been to DevinTownsend.com recently?
Right before the newest album came out, I did. So if it's changed since then, probably not. But
probably hasn't. But it's really funny. It's so funny. I just discovered it like a couple weeks ago. It's really funny.
He's pretty great.
Yeah, I actually have. other than a couple albums that I've gotten through my reviews, because I do write reviews for MetalDiscoveries.com, I just recently got Chronos Zero, and it's all right. It's nothing too spectacular. And other than that work that I do as far as listening to albums and writing reviews, I actually have purchased some albums recently, kind of inspired by Chris, because Chris, you've gone out and bought CDs and actually bring physical media to me, and I'm like, what? People still do that? Yes, they do. And I did recently pick up Halo of Blood. It was Children of Bodom's 2013 album.
Their
It's pretty
newest
good.
was also pretty awesome too.
I actually wanted to get that one, but this is the only one they had, and I was like, well, I don't have this one either, so it was super inexpensive as it being almost 3 years old now. But it's all right, not too bad. 40 minutes, as Children of Bodom CDs usually tend to be. And then two albums that after last year, I was considering probably the album of the year. And I don't have a lot of time listening to the new Amorphous or the new Children of Bodom or a few other ones that I really want to get some more time into before I really figure out which was the best album last year. But the two that I had as my first thoughts as far as albums, other than Ghost, that may be the best one right there. I have that one as well. I just don't know where it was, or don't know where it is right now. But Soilwork, The Ride Majestic.
Phenomenal.
This is really, really, really great. And then
somehow, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Somehow they topped their last album, which was a double album, and I didn't think that was going to be possible. But that album is kind of a throwback, much darker than their last couple of albums, and much heavier. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it is. I actually think it's quite a bit better than their most recent works, but I haven't been in love with a Soilwork album since before the Stabbing the Drama, whatever the one was before that. Why can't I remember it? Some Natural Born Chaos. Natural Born Chaos. That's it.
Fun fact: Devin Townsend produced Natural Born Chaos.
And that makes sense. I think we discussed that once before. That's crazy. And then one of the big surprise of the year for me is actually Glory Hammer Space 1999. And if you
did not listen to that one.
If you like Devin Townsend and the rock opera sounds, this is amazing. It's more space metal, so it's a little bit of Devin Townsend, a little bit of Iron Savior, and the album is hilarious. There's some songs that are serious, but there's definitely a lot of comedy in here. And the very bottom of the instruction manual is huge, and it's actually got a poster inside of it. Not instruction manual. Wow, I'm talking about games here. the booklet of the lyrics and stuff. But on the very back of the lyrical booklet, it says, "No unicorns were harmed in the making of this album. However, 5.4 billion humans were terminally harmed in the destruction of Earth during track 10. This is an unfortunate side effect for which we apologize profusely. Please send any complaints to the Dark Sorcerer Zargothrax at the following address, zargothrax@gloryhammer.com." To which I did email them and just said, thank you for taking care of the human, the viruses that were on Earth and all this, blah, blah, blah. And they responded back just with a generic paragraph of, keep on rocking or something like that. It was really funny.
Speaking of, and I don't want to take up too much time on this, but there are some fantastic sounding albums that are going to be coming out in the next couple months. I mentioned Omnium Gatherum.
Yep.
In Mourning has a new one coming, and so does Persephone.
So In Mourning and Persephone and Be'lakor?
And Be'lakor sometime this year. I don't think that's going to be early this year, but that is coming.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic year for melodic death and for prog metal.
Wow, that is really crazy. I want all of those because In Mourning and Persephone and Be'lakor, all three of those bands are out of this world fantastic. So. Persephone, because that's when I'm looking at Persephone, and it's like Persephone? No, it's Persephone, you idiot. But Persephone sounded funnier. I'm going to grab my Persephone. All right, so anyway, video games, metal games. We're here to talk about some metal games. I think what would be fun is if we just kind of go back and forth between the three of us, name off some games, maybe make our own little personal Game Hugger top 10 most metal games, and we'll just kind of take turns going back and forth until we have our top three. I think there are some that are obvious that are games that are so full of metal, that have metal music in it, metal themes in it, all kinds of craziness to it. And then there's some games that maybe are surprising. So, Aaron, what are some descriptions as to what a metal game could be?
Uh, I think like what I was using when I was trying to think of what metal games to use is music that I feel is, metal in some way, shape, or form, right? Obviously. And then also I wanted a game where I could take a screenshot from like the middle of the game, and if it was like, 2D or something, like imagine it in 3D or whatever, and put that on like an album of, a band and see if it would fit. And like if it fits, that makes it like, and the more that it would fit like on a metal band's album cover, like the more metal I think that is.
Yeah.
So you can fit in the themes too of, there's obviously a lot of like dark themes and demons and gods, warfare, gore type stuff. That's always in metal, so that's always something that I look forward to. And destruction, of course.
Okay. So, do you think there's a possibility that a game might not have a single song in it that's metal, or a single heavy metal song in it, but it could still be considered a metal game?
Yeah, I think there are games out there that like even the music doesn't quite fit as metal, like Darksiders. Like its music is very like symphonic classical style, but it's definitely very metal. It's a very metal game, I would say.
What about something like the Serious Sam series?
Yeah,
Serious Sam, though, does have some metal-sounding tracks to it. If you listen to the soundtrack, at least Serious Sam 3 and the first one. I don't remember Serious Sam 2, although that one wasn't very good anyway. So.
Okay, so those games do have metal in it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing from established artists, but the soundtracks when you're chewing through demons and stuff
Okay.
is hard rock metal sounding, definitely.
That's awesome. I actually prefer that a lot of times, unless there's like new music that's made specifically for that game by like established artists. Like that's awesome. But I love when a game has an original soundtrack. That's like the best thing in the world, especially when it's when someone could mistake it for an actual band or an actual something that you would hear on the radio. That's always exciting.
I think it's also okay to have established artists for songs that weren't necessarily written for it if it fits into it very well. I think there's something to say as opposed to just trying to cram metal songs in there for the sake of it.
True.
There are some songs that actually on my list that I'm going to bring up to that point as well. So I think that you can strike a balance, but I definitely appreciate all original, metal sounding scores. Uh, for example, the most recent Wolfenstein game had the guitarist from Meshuggah write original music for that one.
Holy crap, that's awesome.
Yeah. So there's definitely things to be said about original music, especially when you get people who know the genre to do it. But also, there are definitely games out there that have metal sounding tracks that probably don't have a ton of metal experience or aren't, major artists. It's just a musical department trying to put something together that fits, which is pretty awesome too.
Okay, Aaron, why don't you go first with your first game? And this can be of all the games that you have, maybe you're thinking of the ones that maybe are the least amount of your list, and then we'll go all the way to the most metal of all of them. And I don't know, you had mentioned, Aaron, about maybe just saying, like, if we all agreed on what the number one was, which is the obvious selection, that maybe we could just try to figure out games that aren't that one.
yeah. I think because I think like all of us probably agree on Brutal Legend being the most metal game.
I personally think it is, yes.
It has to be, and I think it's a good idea to kind of maybe get that one out of the way since it was mentioned.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, how can you not, consider a game that was written as a love letter to metal, stars Jack Black, has freaking Ozzy Osbourne in it as a voice actor,
Yep.
and just the soundtrack on that thing. I mean, you've got 3 Inches of Blood, you've got Children of Bodom, you've got Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, the Scorpions, Manowar, Mastodon, Black Sabbath, Dark Tranquillity. I mean, the soundtrack is just enslaved. I mean, Slayer, Iced Earth, Judas Priest. I mean, you can't. I could sit here and list them for like 10 minutes and not even go through all the artists. It's just full of metal, and the whole game is based around a metal roadie. I don't know how you can get more metal.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And this whole conversation came up about a week ago when I think it was you, Chris. You shared on the Twitterverse or the Facebook world. IGN, was it? Or was it Game Trailers? I don't even remember.
I think it was Game Trailers.
Game Trailers it was one of those two, had a top 10 most metal games of all time. And they had in this list, Brutal Legend was listed at what, 4th or 5th or something like that?
I think it was 5th or 6th.
Yeah, and they said that the reason why it wasn't number 1, even though it was probably the most metal game on their list, is because it was sort of a parody of metal, and it was too silly or something. And I just was shocked because all of the games on their list were all kind of parodies of these. I mean, they took seriously, put in the new Splatterhouse remake or whatever the hell this reboot of Splatterhouse that they put on there, and it has some metal in it, I guess, but they pumped it like it was a serious, awesome action game, and everyone hated it. Like, how can you? It was just a crap hack and slash game that was rated M for mature because I don't know reasons. I don't know. It was an awful game. And they also listed a few other ones that I'm like, okay, I guess you could call that, but they didn't talk about anything that was, like 10 years old and older than 10 years ago. Like, there have been games that have been metal themed or had metal music in it for much longer than the last 10 years, and I thought that was kind of lame. So
yeah, I agree, and I think that it's especially, they call it too much of a parody, but I didn't really see it as a parody at all. I mean, yeah, there was humor in it, because metal's not always supposed to be serious, and
right.
Fans don't necessarily take it seriously. I saw it as a giant love letter. I mean, why else would you have Rob Halford and Ozzy Osbourne involved in voiceovers? It just,
right.
It seemed like people who were enthusiastic about metal making a game about metal, and there's no way that deserved to be 6th on a list.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I also think it's weird, too, because if there's any genre of music that I would think supports parodying itself, it's metal.
Right?
Like, so many of the bands take things, like, lightly and not seriously at all. They're from maybe black metal. But,
yeah, right.
Let's not go there.
But, like, I mean, if you go to Kanye West and try to, like, parody his music, he'll freak the fuck out. If you do that to, like, the metal bands, they'll just, like, laugh and, like, headbang or whatever. They don't care.
Yep. All right, Aaron. So let's hear a game off your list. Most metal games.
We're supposed to start with the ones on our list that we think are the least metal, right?
Yeah. If you were doing a top 10 list, this would be your number 10. Number 10.
I'd probably have to go with Codename Steam. It's a newer game, made by the people who made the Fire Emblem series, and it's interesting because I had to debate whether or not I'd consider it metal, because it had some of those things I talked about, and it featured Lovecraftian horror stuff, which I think is like a very metal concept, cosmic horror, and the kind of thing. I feel like it really fit in like the prog metal, power metal, like that kind of category of what I'd imagine on their album cover, because it has a metal soundtrack, which I think is actually pretty awesome, especially when you're playing it. Just kind of like sneaks up on you sometimes, because they'll have something symphonic to start a mission, and then like the battles start going, and it gets right into like heavy metal stuff. But I like the fact that you had these people. It was like this steampunk environment. You had this group of people going to fight, or to join Abraham Lincoln to fight against these aliens that were all like crazy, like tentacle, cosmic horror inspired aliens and stuff. It was really interesting. I felt like it fits under that description of metal, not quite so much as some of the other games on my list, but it definitely fits there.
Yeah, I like that one. I've heard a lot of good things about that game. Haven't played it myself, but I really want to check it out.
I like it, but it's definitely a love-hate game, because there's a lot of people I know who don't like it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Yeah,
And it's not. I'm not gonna, sit here and bash the game. There are definitely merits to it. My biggest issue with the game was just the controls. It's not the most intuitive game to just pick up and play, even if you're familiar with tactic style strategy games. There's definitely a learning curve to it, and learning to kind of battle with the mechanics and the controls to kind of make things work sometimes. Camera angles weren't the best. To me, it was more a lack of polish, not that I disliked the theme or the game concept or anything like that.
I do feel it would have done better on a PC, or it fits a PC better than it fits the 3DS. But obviously, Nintendo's not going to make a PC game.
This is Yep.
True. All right, Chris, how about you?
So I'm kind of having a bit of a debate on this one, but I'm going to have to go with one that I probably wouldn't have thought of until I saw it on that Games Radar list, or sorry, the game trailers list. It's very debatable whether or not it could be considered heavy metal. But I felt like they made a good case for it, and I'm gonna make the same one. It's gonna have to be F-Zero. Um, because yeah, it's a racing game, but it's very fast, high octane. That game's all about speed,
Yep.
and the soundtrack is at least rock oriented. And you could debate, yeah, maybe it's not a metal game, but it would be definitely at the bottom of my list if I ever considered it. Um,
Sure.
so I felt like there was some merit to what they were saying. I wouldn't put it in a top five or anything, like they did, but I think that there's definitely some merit to arguing that could fit.
Sure. Is that like the whole series F-Zero or just like F-Zero X or GX or?
Um, if I had to pick one, it would be F-Zero X.
Yep.
Um, but you could maybe make a case for some of the other ones, but I would probably choose F-Zero X.
Yep. I actually agree. That's one of mine. That's one of mine. The games on my selection too. I think the soundtrack's awesome. Just from like the select a car option screen and like the braces themselves. They took a lot of this Super NES game music like Mute City and Big Blue, and they wound up kind of metalizing them with guitar solos and all kinds of stuff. And I loved it. I thought the soundtrack was really really good.
Yeah, fantastic series. Kind of upset that they haven't made one in a while, but
I know. I don't think we're gonna get one for Wii U either. It's gonna be the NX or whatever the next Nintendo system is.
yeah, we'll see. I don't think it was a very high seller for them since the SNES days, really.
Right. Yeah. The last one they did actually was not the best game. They let Sega develop it and they kind of just screwed around with it. So
You mean Sega doesn't know how to handle an IP? Tell me it isn't true.
that's crazy. I know, right? I know. I don't know what they were thinking. Um, so for a game that would be sort of lower on my list for best metal games of all time, I was actually going to pick out more of a rock and roll game, but it's got a couple metal tracks on it, and that was Rock and Roll Racing, another racing game on the Super NES or Genesis, depending on which flavor of 16-bit console you had at the time. But they had Born to Be Wild, Highway Star. There was a few other games or a few other songs that were on that game, and it was done by Interplay. They did a really good job. They sampled some rock tracks, and I think Highway Star is kind of the beginning of speed metal or fast-paced rock songs that Deep Purple put together ages ago, and to hear it on a Super Nintendo sound chip when I was a kid was amazing, and I absolutely was blown away by it. And it got me kind of like a gateway drug into like faster rock and faster metal and stuff. So I'd always consider that one at least an honorable mention on my list for best metal games. And the universe itself, we were talking about earlier about how the game can have that kind of feeling or a flavor to it that makes you feel like this is real metal here. This is where the heavy metal comes from, and the world itself is you're going from planet to planet and racing against these other cars, and you're killing each other, and it's awesome. Like people die, and the pits of despair and all these kind of things, and the weapons that you can get, and all the characters, the way that there's some half cyborg, half people, different alien species and things like that. It's got a little bit of like a mix of the heavy metal movie series or the comic book series into a racing game, and I think it fits perfect. Music, the soundtrack was amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Mentioning Highway Star, I mean, I mean, there's no question that should at least be an honorable mention as far as metal is concerned.
Yeah.
Aaron, that comes back to you. Do you have another one for your list?
Yes. And this one, I guess, is kind of debatable as to whether or not the music is metal, because I consider it to be metal, and some people don't because it doesn't feature electric guitars. But that would be God of War, like the series, basically. The entire. I just have the third one remastered here for PS4. And part of the reason for that is I felt like metal was really inspired by classical a lot more than other genres, I think. And this was kind of like that classical style, that symphonic style, looking back to metal for its inspiration. So in its music, you could definitely rock out to it, even though they're not using an electric guitar or bass or a drum set. Although they actually do use a drum set. And the feel of the world, it's one of those games that's really up there in terms of a metal feel, because you are like disemboweling gods. And it's hard to think of many things that are more metal than like disemboweling an immortal being. I can't really think of anything that's above that.
Nice.
I can see it. It personally would not be included on my own list. And I agree with you that heavy metal is definitely very inspired by classical music. You can see that in a lot of metal genres, and especially early metal music. I can kind of see that, and especially with the mythology theme to the game and the series. Mythology and gods and that kind of thing are heavily featured in a few metal genres. So I can definitely see that. I'm not going to go so far as to agree to put it on a list of mine, but I can definitely see where you're coming from. I can respect that choice. I love that series. It's one of my favorite game series. So I have nothing bad to say about God of War.
It's great. That reminds me, actually, I don't know this, but does Sabaton have a God of War related song? Because it seems like if there was a band to do one,
their music is almost exclusively World War II related. So I don't think you'd see it from them.
Manowar had a God of War song.
Did it really?
Yes, they did. And a fun fact, Megadeth has a Gears of War song.
Yeah.
And at the very beginning of a game that I would have as an honorable mention, but I'm not going to put it in my top 10, was actually Heavy Metal Geomatrix. It's a heavy metal game, so it's the heavy metal universe, which of course is metal. But I don't know, it's a little bit disqualified because it uses music that's not exclusive to the game. They just pulled a lot of songs in. And one of those was Moto Psycho by Megadeth. That's a...
Yeah.
Anyway.
The kids like Megadeth.
That's what the kids like these days. Their new album has potential to be pretty good, so
it really does. I mean, they've got the drummer from Lamb of God now, which is a plus. But Dave Mustaine's still involved, so I'm kind of still on the fence.
He's always going to be involved.
I know, and it's unfortunate. He can't sing like he used to be able to, and it's really a shame. Their last few albums have just been awful.
I would actually say Super Collider is the worst of all of them. I would even put it lower than Risk.
I agree. 100%.
It was just so uninspired and boring, and it was all stock guitar riffs. It was just terrible.
Yeah, you're like this could have been recorded by a Megadeth tribute band, and not in a good way.
Yeah. No. I enjoyed The World Needs a Hero. I enjoyed The System Has Failed was pretty good. But
It's been a
there,
long time since I
it's
listened to that stuff.
it's been a long exactly, and that's funny because that's like all the post euthanasia stuff is like where they started going downhill. I mean, Cryptic Writings was pretty good, but I don't know, it was such a big step down from Euthanasia and Countdown, and then you had Risk, which was what everybody considers this awful. It was like Load and Reload of Megadeth. It was just terrible. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Load and Reload, it's the Metallica mid '90s midlife crisis. But yeah, they did Risk, and then they were just like they went without an identity for so long because Dave hurt his hand or something, and I thought the band was gone forever. And then they did like a best of, and all of a sudden it was like, and then they did A World Needs a Hero, and it was like, oh, this is pretty good. This is about as good as what Cryptic Writings was. And then they did a few other ones, and I don't know. We could talk about Megadeth for a whole hour and just talk about about our whole disappointments
Yeah,
and our favorite things with it too, because they did some great music for sure. But
absolutely.
okay, so hey, that is our number 7 God of War series. How about number 6, Chris?
Oh, number 6. I'm kind of tied up here trying to figure one out. But you know what? I'm gonna go with Twisted Metal Black.
Ooh, nice.
I love that game so much, and you could make an argument for it being higher on this list for sure. But it's not necessarily strictly metal. The concept of it is very dark, and it was one of the first games to really take advantage of, first racing games, I guess, to really take advantage of, well, it's not really a racing game, car combat games, I guess,
Sure.
to take advantage of, full CGI cutscenes and stuff on the PS2 like that. And it was dark, it was twisted, it was, I mean, as the name implies, but it did have a heavy soundtrack to it, and did have a Rob Zombie song on it on the soundtrack. So I feel like it's definitely deserving of a place on the list. There are so many games though that are more metal in terms of the soundtrack and kind of what's going on and their obvious influences that I'm not sure it deserved to be higher. But I guess you could make a case for that too. But I love that game so much.
Aaron, where would you put that on a top 10 list?
Twisted Metal, I'd put it probably like 3 or 4, personally.
All right.
Like I'd put like I guess like the series. That was actually going to be my next one. So.
Yeah, I figured that because I saw you like going shit. Yeah, Twisted Metal, the whole series altogether is very metal. I mean, it's like car combat and like the clown and just everything is very. Now, did Insane Clown Posse ever have any ties to that game at all?
No, thank God.
Yeah, thank God. I was gonna say because I thought they had one, but
They
maybe
had
not.
they had their own game series called Backyard Wrestling.
Yeah, that was not a good game
It was
series.
on the PS2, I think.
Yeah, there was some on the PS2 and the Xbox.
Yeah, it featured all of the artists on their record label.
Yep.
And the big thing at the time that was like the new thing is you could like kill people with the environment.
Yep.
So that was I played that one on the PS2. It was not very good.
Yeah, there was actually you could also use some of the created characters that were from random backyard feds that they collected up like data from or whatever, because the Best of Backyard DVD, VHS and DVD series came out like around 2000, between 2000 and 2002 or 2003 or 4 or whatever when they came out with those, and believe it or not, I was on one of those games.
Oh, that's cool.
From some of my really terrible footage of backyard wrestling. Yeah, they didn't. They used I sent them footage from 2 different characters that I played. One was Al Chaos King, and one was Quail Justice. And they used Quail Justice.
Nice.
You could actually make Quail Justice and create a character. It's ridiculous. But anyway, my pick for another game that would be like my runner-up to my top ones, like somewhere in the middle. Would be an excellent game that came on a PC, a DOS game that you can now get on like Scum VM. It's Full Throttle, which a lot of people kind of consider a prequel or a precursor to the Brutal Legend game. I mean, it has a feeling that it's in a post-apocalyptic world, with like deserts everywhere and just people beating the crap out of each other all over the place. But it's not. Supposedly, it takes place on our Earth in the mid '90s or whatever, just like it was. But it was like in Nevada or somewhere else. But you're a biker gang. You have the one main character, and the big company, like say Harley Davidson or whatever, is going out of business, and they're not going to make motorcycles anymore. So you're trying to like help out and figure out a way to make the company money, or actually I think it's not quite that storyline, but it's like the main. There's some kind of big conspiracy going on where this person who's an advisor to the company takes out like the owner, and the owner's a really cool guy, and you're trying to get to the bottom of it and find out, like solve a murder or whatever, and you're like just a big ripped long-haired hippie dude on a motorcycle riding around and getting in trouble all over the place, and it's awesome. The soundtrack's awesome. The game opening segment is really, really good, and it's really fun, really good stuff. And it's Full Throttle for the PC. That'd be on my list.
Good stuff. No, that was definitely worth a mention on the list for sure. I didn't play too much of it back in the DOS days, but I'm definitely familiar with it, and that soundtrack is incredible.
Yeah, they wound up going with like a whole bunch of smaller bands for all the music, the soundtrack for it, but they attempted to get some bigger names. Like I think they contacted Motorhead, and they contacted like the Foo Fighters and a few other bands from like early '90s or whatever that were really good. And every time they would contact a band, they're like, "Well, what can we do? Can you make an original song? Sure, that's awesome. Are we going to get paid? No." So they like got turned down over and over again until finally they got some like really small indie band or whatever that did most of the music. But it was all really good, really well done. A lot of biker rock and some metal and stuff. It's pretty cool. So let's go in reverse this time. Number 4 is going to go back to Chris.
Oh, number 4. I'm going to go with Killing Floor. The whole series, actually. 1 and 2, they're both incredible. Most of their music is original. Well, kind of original. I can't even pronounce the name of the artist or the band that does their soundtrack, but it's created for the game. And it's definitely hard rock, heavy metal, some thrash themes in the music as well. If you're not familiar with Killing Floor, it is a cooperative online multiplayer game, first-person shooter, made by a company called Tripwire in England. And you basically just kill a ton of zombies, and you have wave and wave of enemies coming at you. It kind of like Left 4 Dead, with some zombie types and whatnot too, besides the generic basic zombies. But in between rounds, you find a trader, and you have to level up your equipment. You actually gain levels in the class that you play persistently outside of each round. And so, the way you play gets better and changes over time. But the soundtrack is just really, really heavy. And Killing Floor 2, besides some original music that they did, also has songs from Demon Hunter, Living Sacrifice, and Impending Doom, the bands. And Demon Hunters, I was surprised to see on there, because they're kind of Christian-themed metal.
Interesting.
But the song Death, really heavy, really good, and definitely fits. So I'm a fan of the series. I don't play it as often anymore, but I played a ton of it when it first came out. I think in 04 or 05, I want to say the first one came out. The second one, I think, is still in early access. Should be out soon, PC only. But really good series, and definitely makes my top few for sure.
Very cool. What system does that come out for? Is that a PC thing?
I think it's just PC. I don't remember if the original was released on 360 and PS3. I don't think it was.
Interesting. That is awesome. I've heard a little bit about it and haven't really ever played it or anything, but it's definitely something. I'm writing these all down so I can check out any of the ones that I haven't played very much. I haven't played Codename Steam, and I haven't played Killing Floor, but they're both ones I'm going to check out. Aaron, do you want number 3 or number 2?
I'll take number 2. I think I
All
have an
right.
idea what we do with number 2. Unless you steal with number 3, in which case I'm gonna have to like go over there and choke you.
I doubt I'll steal it with number 3. Well, maybe. You never know. But this would be actually right next to Brutal Legend for my favorite metal games of all time. And my pick for number 3 is Lords of Thunder on the TurboGrafx CD. It's a Super CD-ROM. It's completely loaded, absolutely from beginning to end, with some of the best metal I've ever heard in a soundtrack in my entire life. Matter of fact, I was 14 when I got this game, and it absolutely floored me. I couldn't believe the guitar solos, the crunchy guitars. It's amazing the way that they put these tracks together with the levels. The gameplay itself is a shoot 'em up. You play as like a little character on the screen. This is 1993, so you can think about what kind of 16-bit graphics were going on at the time. But he's like a dude with a sword, and he has projectile weapons, and he floats all over the screen, and the bad guys are just flying at him in hordes and waves of bad guys. And the metal is just blisteringly fast. Fast guitar solos, all kinds of different changes and intervals, and the transitions between fast to slow to fast again, bass, drum solos, like everything is in this, and it matches up perfect with the levels. And there's this one like spot in every level that the music just it hits it perfect, where like a big giant boss will come on the screen and it just like hits this big bass like do 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 do. And if you pause the game, it'll actually screw it up, which is funny because the music will keep going, but the level will be paused, so it won't match up anymore. But there's certain levels that you don't ever want to pause. That's the funny thing about it. But it's awesome. I absolutely love it. I think it's my favorite soundtrack in any game I've ever heard. It's out of this world, and I recommend anybody that doesn't own a TurboGrafx 16, which is pretty much everybody. But there's good ways to get a hold of that soundtrack, and I definitely listen to it from beginning to end. It's amazing.
You with your TurboGrafx 16.
Hey, if I don't mention it at least once a day,
Withdrawals.
Yeah, I know, right?
So,
Number 2.
yes, for number 2. I had to think, because Chris kind of put me on the spot. Originally, I was going to put Twisted Metal. I had to think, and I was like, I can't put Carmageddon because it's too close to Twisted Metal and F-Zero and Rock and Roll Racing. We've already had 3 car games. I thought maybe like Final Fantasy, like 7 in particular, but the atmosphere isn't quite there. I mean, the music,
Sure.
like the Black Mages literally has the composer for the Final Fantasy games in it.
True. Yeah. And we're not gonna let you state the obvious, like like Rock Band or Guitar Hero.
No. My pick for number 2 is the Doom series.
Ooh, nice.
And that was actually the number 1 on the game trailers list. I mean, like, and they had some pretty good points for that. You fight aliens and demons. You cover like such a wide breadth of like the different types of metal that are there. It kind of fits all of that. So.
Well, not only that, it has a really heavy soundtrack.
Yeah.
And you're literally fighting your way to hell. So I would agree. And when I saw their top 10 list and that at number 1, if I couldn't put Brutal Legend there, I could definitely make a very strong case for Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Doom's got. I've played it on the Jaguar, the Sega CD, the 32X, Super Nintendo, PC, and all of those games. Some of those games actually on the earlier hardware doesn't even have music, which is interesting. So, but the universe itself, very, very metal. I mean, just thinking about
Doom itself was so groundbreaking. I mean, it basically defined first-person shooters going forward. Even though there were first-person shooters before it, Wolfenstein and whatnot,
Baseball 2000.
The way it did things changed the genre forever, and that soundtrack was unlike anything you had heard when you booted up a game before. So yeah, I full-heartedly agree with that decision.
That game also, it changed the industry forever because
yeah, it did.
When it came out, it was like, I don't know if it was the first game to have a level editor, but it was the first really popular game to have a level editor and to have modding tools for it. And that just, I mean, it's not so much now, but in the 90s and the early 2000s, the modding community was huge, and so many people who are in the industry today got in there because of the modding community, which started with Doom.
Yep. And it's people like Cliffy B and a lot of other people. A lot of the games that we take for granted today started out as mods too. Counter Strike, Team Fortress, um, and then you have stuff like Portal. Started out as a student project, not necessarily a mod. But Dota, I mean, the entire MOBA genre owes its existence to a mod. So, I mean, there's so much that has come from modding, and that was only possible on the PC back in the day. I mean, yeah, the consoles will be getting some mods coming up here in the current generation, but you still can't develop those mods on the console really. Um, Doom was definitely, it paved the way for that stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so here's our list. We got a complete list now. We made our own top 10, and I think it's actually pretty good. It's a hell of a lot better than that Game Trailers piece of shit. Number 10, Codename Steam. Number 9, F-Zero X. Number 8, Rock and Roll Racing. Number 7, God of War series. Number 6, Twisted Metal Black. Number 5, Full Throttle. Number 4, Killing Floor 1 and 2. Number 3, Lords of Thunder. Number 2, Doom. All. Doom 1 and 2, or just Doom?
The whole series.
Doom series. Okay. And number 1,
Play the new one.
Reigning Champion, Brutal Legend. I think, at least.
Now I could say I think that's a fantastic list. I will say that there are a few others that I could see making a list like this. It's so hard to nail down just 10 metal games.
Let's go over our honorable mentions, because honestly, had you made a top 10 list, it would probably be very different than the one that we made all together. This is kind of a community. We collaborated.
Yeah,
it's a collaborative top 10 list. Aaron, did you hear that? I used your favorite word. So, what are some honorable mentions? Hit me with some.
The first one for me was actually on Game Trailer's list as well, is Guilty Gear.
Yeah,
I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Easily that could go in the top 5 of our list even.
Yep.
And you just can't. I don't even know how to, like. It's just so obvious of a choice. I think. The guitar licks, the obvious inspiration from metal that those characters take. You could tell that the people designing that game built it around the soundtrack, which was a heavy metal soundtrack through and through.
Okay. How about the Rockman or Mega Man series? I mean, thinking about that universe, thinking about the gameplay. I mean, all of the characters, they're named like Mega Man, Bass. Like, all of the characters have very metal styles to it, and very metal. The music, especially in the 8-bit NES games, anytime you hear remixes or covers of their songs, they're always metal. Like the guitar solos, and you even said a Megadeth song sounds like a Mega Man game. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's a game series that I could see metal fitting into, for sure. I'm not sure as I would go so far to call it a metal series in its own right. It definitely has inspired some of that, sure. But the soundtrack that it has, I feel like, while it fits the series and is, it pumps you up and makes you want to keep playing, I wouldn't necessarily call the soundtrack as it was in those games metal.
Okay. Aaron, how about you?
For honorable mention, I mean, it was one of the ones that I mentioned when thinking about another metal game to add, and that would be Final Fantasy VII. I'm not really a big fan of the game, but I am a big fan of its atmosphere, its music, which is metal inspired, and at points is metal, especially the battle music. But yeah, it had a very dark atmosphere, very
Yep.
like tonally metal-ish and very weird, quirky. A lot of you know metal, actual metal in the environment, but like the rivets and stuff that you'd see from a lot of early heavy metal 80s stuff. So I feel like that was like that you'd see on like their album covers or whatever. So I feel like it would be not in the top 10, but definitely like an honorable mention for being metal in a sense. But not really many of the other Final Fantasy games. I think really just Final Fantasy VII fits that. I think the other ones just kind of departed from it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I actually would consider the most metal moment in any Final Fantasy game was not in 7, but it was the introduction to Final Fantasy X. When you are whisked away into this game of whatever was that ball? They called it bocce ball? Blitz ball, yes.
Yep.
And the opening is done by a band, I think they're called Kilgore, I think. Well, whatever it is, it's funny. But I mean, it opens up like any Final Fantasy game. You got the cutesy little music, and you got all the characters, and you're running around this little area, and you're talking to people, and then all of a sudden you get to the game, and it starts, and it's just like, boom, boom, wow, boom, boom, wow, and it's like the whole it's like this amazing 3 or 4 minute long metal song, and I'm like, is this Final Fantasy? Holy shit! And as I like the song a lot, I actually wound up like looking for it right after I played that game, and I found the band that did it and found some more of their music. They're all right, but that song's awesome. And then the song winds up coming back later in a remix when you fight the boss of the game. So it's metal. There's some metal in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that was one that like I thought about it, but then the game is so upbeat, like visually.
Yeah.
And it kind of so it's like that moment really is, but then the rest of the game, I'm like I can't really call the rest of the game metal. I think it's too upbeat in tone and colors. It's like too poppy.
I agree. Any other honorable mentions? Honorables?
So I've got 2 more, but one, I mean, it doesn't really need much discussion, I don't think. It's a mobile game, Robot Unicorn Attack. I mean, the theme song is Blind Guardian.
Nice.
You can't really get more metal than that. It's an endless runner where you use a unicorn, but in the newer one, you can like upgrade your unicorn and give it like black wings and smoke for a tail and like lightning coming off its horn, and so I would say maybe it's got some metal. Probably an honorable mention just for the soundtrack, really.
Nice.
The big one that I feel like could make this list, but I felt like it wasn't a very great game, is a game called Karma Flow. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was a small independent game that released on Steam recently. I think they're doing it in 2 parts. I think only the first part is out so far. But it's like a 3D platformer. Kind of slow-paced, has some interesting mechanics, deals with good and evil karma, but it's a rock opera game. And their soundtrack is incredible. They actually got a ton of established metal artists to participate in this soundtrack. So you've got Simone Simmons from Epica, Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth, Mark from Dragon Force, Tony from Sonata Arctica, and Alyssa from Arch Enemy.
Wow.
It's incredible the amount of people they got in this. They got the singer from Amaranth.
Which one?
The woman, Elise.
Okay. Nice.
The Charlotte from Delane.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's tons of tracks, and
What's the name of this game?
Karma Flow.
Interesting. I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's definitely more symphonic in nature. Alyssa does. I think she does vocals on quite a bit of it too, and so does the singer from Delane.
Nice.
Alyssa does like some of the evil sounding vocals with her growls. But it's really interesting, and it was on Kickstarter a while back, and I backed it.
Oh, very cool.
Gameplay-wise, it's all right. I mean, it's nothing special. The new mechanics that they did are pretty cool, but really it comes down to the soundtrack and the story. It tells this whole epic story in the form of a rock opera. So all of the cutscenes are music where people are singing. But yeah, so definitely, if the game was better, it probably would have been in my top 5. But I think it deserves at least a mention just for how metal that soundtrack is and who is involved with it.
That's really cool. Yeah, that looks awesome. I'm gonna have to check that out.
They actually got all of the singers together and did a concert of the story as well.
Nice.
Holy shit. They're actually doing another. Well, it's actually. Oh no, it was okay. It was in January of last year.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow, that's so cool.
But like, it was interesting because there's a bunch of puzzles, and as you solve the puzzles, you can choose either good or evil. And the way you solve the puzzles and the path you choose changes the sound and changes the environment and changes what tracks and music plays to tell the story differently.
Wow. That's really cool, dude. I want to check this out now. That looks awesome. I had a couple other honorable mentions. Right behind me here, you can see Electronic Arts. That's the game Crew Ball, which is a Motley Crue themed pinball game on the Sega Genesis. It was all Motley Crue music. Take it for what it's worth. It's if you like Motley Crue, you might want to check that out. Although it is on the Sega Genesis, so you got 16-bit blops and whistles and boops here and there. And another one was actually on the Sega CD, which has an awesome soundtrack. Is Terminator, the movie, the game. When that came out for the Sega CD, it was obviously like 10 years after the movie had been released, but they got the rights to Terminator 1. I think Virgin Records pulled together a bunch of really good artists and made a really good soundtrack. It's actually written and performed by Tommy Tallarico, who's kind of a piece of shit, but he does work. I don't know. He's just he used to be on the show. I think it was called like the Electric Playground or something like that, where he would.
I know. Yep, him and what's his name? Oh, I can't remember his name. It was on
G4.
G4. Yeah. Yeah. He. I have mixed feelings about Tommy Tallarico.
Great musician.
He's a fantastic musician, great composer, and he knows his stuff. I have a couple friends who are actually like friends with him, like on a first name basis.
Interesting.
And he comes off way more genuine in person. I can't say anything really beyond that. He definitely came off as an ass in that show.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'm basing that on. That and a
but
few
he's also
YouTube shows I've seen.
Yeah, but he's also responsible for the Video Games Live Tour, which is awesome.
That's what I was going to mention. Yep, he does work on that, and that's really, really impressive. He's done some other soundtracks that I love too, like Earthworm Jim and a couple other ones that were really good soundtracks. So, I mean, the guy's talented for sure. Terminator was the first one that he worked on that was like a CD game. So that had like real guitars and all kinds of cool stuff, and he got to remix the Terminator theme with like guitars and stuff like that. So really good stuff. And obviously the Terminator universe, post-apocalyptic, there's not much more metal than the Terminator universe in my opinion. So that was just a couple more of my honorable mentions, but I like it. We have a good list here. This is good. We should be working for like GameTrailers.com. We should be showing them like this is a list of good games that you guys should put in your list, not fucking Splatterhouse. Wow. That reboot of the series was one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's not fun. The music sucked. It was ridiculous.
Splatterhouse really brought that list down.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did.
And there were other ones on there that were pretty good. Like I almost included Painkiller on my own list, which was one on theirs, because that game is. I mean, it's the classic, Quake Doom style.
Yep.
Kill zombies and undead and whatnot. I think it even used the Quake engine. But it definitely had a metal soundtrack too. So they put together a good list. I mostly disagreed with the order.
Yeah.
Putting games like Splatterhouse and F-Zero as high as they did while putting Brutal Legend at 6
was weird.
No.
I mean, I guess if they wanted to be shocking and like it's so obvious that Brutal Legend would be number one, that's why we did it. I mean, maybe they were just like, let's get out of the way early so that we can, be more shocking with the rest of the list. But I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, thank you guys for being on the show. Thank you everyone for listening today. I hope you had a good time. We just did this for fun. Metal games. We made our top 10 list. It was a good time. If you ever have any more suggestions for us, any questions for us here in the Game Huggers, you can always tweet me on the Twitter universe at _Joshua Turbo. Do not forget the underscore, as it is the most important underscore in all of the internet. And then, of course, you can follow us on Facebook or here on the Podomatic website if you're listening to us on Podomatic, which is www.podomatic.com/gamehuggers. Thank you so much for listening. Aaron. I mixed Chris and Aaron. Anyway.
That doesn't
Aaron,
even make sense.
There. That doesn't even make any sense.
Chris, if you have anybody you want to shout out to, any URLs or Twitters or anything.
Yeah, my Twitter is at enumboss. And yeah, you can also follow me on Facebook. I don't really have anything else going on at the moment, but definitely glad to be able to participate in this. Thanks for having me, and it was definitely enlightening. I think we put together a great list.
All right, Eric, how about you?
Who's Eric?
I
I don't really have anything. I mean, I have my YouTube channel, which is KH Cloud or whatever, but other than that, I'm on Twitter, but not really posting stuff that often. So yeah, just YouTube and Facebook.
All right, cool. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of the show, and thanks, everybody, for listening. Peace. We'll talk to you guys next week.